Hey everyone, Life on Side B is a podcast of Holy Ourselves, my private practice which helps integrate faith and sexuality through spiritual direction, cohorts, and resources. Learn more at holyourselves, WHOLLY ourselves.org.
Okay. Life on Side B. We are here with our final season and with one of my very favorite people. I'm Henry, if you can't tell already, but I'm with one of my very favorite people on this planet, the one and only Art. Art, hello, how are you?
Hi, bud. I am doing well. Henry, I realized our last episode I called you buddy, and then I flinched as I said it because I feel like buddy is a slur to so many people.
I was just about to say, because I've told you this before, you are literally one of 4 people on this entire planet that I actually like when they call me Butter Buddy. Literally one of 4 people on the entire planet.
I started telling people recently that I use buddy as an identifier. Like, if you ask me how I identify, I'm like, gay, he, him, buddy. And if you like, and it sounds crazy, but if you know me, that's so true.
Oh gosh, that actually is true. It's like in your email tag, he, him. Okay, buddy. I love it. Okay, Art, can you introduce yourself a bit for those who might not be familiar with you, who I don't know how they wouldn't be, but name, title, what you do, brief bio.
Yeah, I am Art Pereira. I am the Director of Events and Partnerships at Revoice, which basically means I run our conference and I run a lot of our leadership development stuff, which is really special to me. And so I help LGBTQ people develop community, and I help develop LGBTQ people who develop community. That's kind of how I think about my job. I've also just been involved in a lot of speaking on basically LGBTQ experience and faith, especially in the Side B space. And the other topic I end up talking a lot about is friendship. I love friendship. It's one of my favorite things. And so I love talking about it and getting to teach on it.
Yes. Well, you are a great friend to me and to many across this country and this world. Art is, like I said, one of my favorite people. We cut up. We are chaotic together in a very good way. Sometimes we're not allowed. Actually, I don't think we've ever been allowed to have a mic together at the same time on a stage. I do not think we've actually ever been.
And now that I control it, I would never make that happen. I would never let us do that. That's correct. Yeah.
I remember Becca was like, no.
Yeah. And now that it's my job running the conference, I'm like, no. Henry and Art, like, you actually have to leave the stage before I can even, like, step on the stairs. That's what has to happen.
You know, it's just, they don't want to see us minorities link up. That's what it really is. We'd be too powerful for them. We'd be too powerful. True. No, also, Art, quick facts about Art before we get in here. So Art used to be a pastor. I mean, he's still a pastor, obviously, but he used to be in a pastoral role at a church. And Art has one of the best pastor voices. Like, you know, when a pastor just goes in that break of their voice and you're about to start crying, you can feel it.
No.
Art's playing a pastor voice can, like, don't let him close out a sermon when he's landing the plane on a sermon or a talk. Have your tissues ready. It's so heartfelt and so genuine. I love it. It moves me every time. So thank you for that.
That's a compliment, because I try not to have pastor voice, because sometimes people have too much pastor voice and I'm like, bro, who even is this person? I've had lunch with you. You don't sound like this.
Like, you did not sound like that last night when we were having
like, why are you making your voice deeper, bro? We all know you.
No, you know what you should do? You need to narrate Greg Cole's books. Like, you should narrate his books. I would love that.
I can't pronounce half the words Greg Cole uses, so really? I don't think I could not, yeah.
Like, I have a tab open, like a thesaurus tab open or dictionary whenever I'm reading something he writes. I'm like, okay, I learned that today. But, okay, y'all. As y'all know, we are finishing up the start last season. And so something we've been doing this season is bringing in former guests and specifically guests from just like really big important topics and episodes, and just kind of tying the last 6 years together. And you've been a very, very big part of just the Side B movement as a whole. Revoice, obviously, just even a life on this podcast, and just the role you play in so many other spaces. So one, just thank you for the invaluable role you have played over the last 6 years in shaping this community in some shape, form, or fashion, and the role you will continue to play long after this podcast is done, and just the history and legacy you've already made. So it is very, very dear. Remember, I talked to Greg Webb a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how like these spaces didn't exist. Like the fact that now we're having this conversation to us, and it's normal. When you and I first got into show in 2018, this conversation was not something we got to have all the time. We're like this, but over the last 6 years, which is incredible, that now there's this friendship, there's this history, there's this just dynamic of leaders and thinkers and teachers and speakers and writers, and there's so many parts of this movement community that's grown, and you've been a very, very large part of that, specifically with Revoice and just even the online presence. And like, I mean, truly, I can't keep up with the chapters, this or that. So I want to give you your flowers first and foremost, and just thank you so much for the work you've done.
So I appreciate that. I was actually re-listening to some Life on Side B episodes and being grateful for y'all, and just the amount of people who've been able to have this like catalog of exploration. I feel like one of the big stressors of Side B life is we have to figure everything out for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And you guys really went out there and collected a bunch of people who were doing the thinking, and like so many people had less work to do and were able to find paths of life because of that. And I just feel so grateful to be a part of that.
Thank you. One of the things that stood out to me when we first met, and how we became friends, was the concept of committed friendships, committed brotherhood, the sorts, whatever language you want to use here. And it's a topic that was deeply important and personal to both you and I, and it's something you have lived out in various communities and with various friends and brothers throughout your adult life. And it's a similar journey I've been on in various seasons and whatnot. And so they always say that like something worth it should cost you something, and following Christ itself should cost you something. And I know personally the costs, like being on this path, and specifically even in committed friendships in this journey, has caused you the price you paid, both good and bad. And I know it's not always easy, and like you've been so brave, and because it's a topic that most people don't talk about, because when people are like, at least back then, it's like, well, is it going to lead to codependency or this or that? Or are you in love with your friends? Or Henry, are you in love with your friends? But y'all, have you met this person? I'm not in love with them, okay? I'm doing this because Christ commanded me to love one another.
That's so real.
Like, truly, sometimes people would ask me that. Like, people would ask you that about Nick, and you'd be like, if y'all only knew how much I'm not in love with this man. But, so I guess just since our last phone call, I mean, I remember what Revoice was it, when you and 19, Nick came 19, so was it 21 when y'all spoke from the front?
Nick has never spoken from the front, but we did a webinar in 21.
Okay, yes. Was that 20?
Yeah,
okay, that was 21. Yep. Okay, yeah. And that obviously came at some cost to both you and him, both publicly and just communally, and y'all's lived situations. Can you give us a recap of just that initial webinar and your whole experience with committed friendships? Just a quick recap, and then we can dive into where are they now kind of.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit on the episode with Elizabeth, but Nick and I, so Nick is my straight brother. He's my chosen family, and we have chosen to live a lot of life together. And we did a webinar for Revoice on gay straight friendship in 2021. I spoke at Revoice 2020. I actually think it was 2020. I spoke at Revoice 2020 online about deeper friendships in the church. And then Nick and I sort of did a deep dive, just talking about what's it like to be a gay guy and a straight guy, living a lot of life together and living a lot of biblical community together. And that got published and got pretty deeply criticized in a lot of spaces. And I think, frankly, like pretty misconstrued, right? Just like, oh my gosh, like these guys are secretly a couple. And like everything got nitpicked, right? And I think that some of that hyper scrutiny is part of the existence, like what we carry as queer people, and we experience homophobia is like hyper scrutiny. Everything we say, we have to explain 6 times and make sure it's like palatable. And so when I say like, oh man, I just love this guy, people are like, oh my gosh, he loves a man. And I'm just like, have you read the Bible? Like there's a lot of like mutual like love that doesn't have to be described all the time, because we like see that love is a beautiful and sanctifying force. And
these are the same people that cry when Tom Brady like breaks an ankle. So
yeah, it's true. Yeah. And so that's exactly like it that was pretty hard. But Nick, and like I mentioned in, actually it was noticing like Life on Side B episode, like I mentioned that like Nick feels a little bit like a friendship apologist. Like Nick really loves friendship, and he's really proud of the way we're able to like practice faithful friendship to each other. So since then we got a chance to be interviewed for a book, and so we have a chapter in a book that's a national bestseller, which is just so crazy. And then like from the book, then like we get quoted on Ezra Klein's podcast, and there's a Time magazine article about me and Nick, and you're just like, this is so weird. Like but it's just like, I've realized people are so hungry for real friendship, right? Yes. They're so hungry for it. And so suddenly I'm like in a bookstore filled with like a bunch of non-Christians who are interviewing me about my experience of friendship. Right? It's so like, like I got asked to go to DC and do a speaking event, and like I'm the only Christian in the room. And like the only reason I'm living out this friendship thing I'm living at is because of Jesus. And so it's just like such a cool thing.
I just got chills again. Yeah.
Oh, girl. And like that's the thing, is like I think we in the Side B movement have such a beautiful love of friendship that I think the church is hungry for, and the world around us is hungry for. So that's a lot of what's come out of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, like just the male loneliness epidemic, and it's literally classified as an epidemic in this country. And it's like, well, why do y'all think that is? Because like we have done a poor job as a culture and as a church about teaching how to nurture just healthy, biblical, solid communal friendship. And it's like, well, of course, like men are lonely or this, because like they're taught that to connect in any meaningful way with another man is, or you're gay, or you're doing something sketchy or weird. And it's like, we were made for a relationship. Like God exists in relationship himself. So it's like, we are made for the exact same. And so it's always fascinating when 2024, about 2025, there's still such a stigma on like friendships in a certain way. And it's like, nobody wins when that happened, right?
Yeah.
Say, so since then, you and Nick, obviously in the last 4 years, y'all have done a lot of life together. Where's an update on like the current status of the friendship, any developments, living arrangements, marriage plans, moving plans? Give me the tea.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny. I feel like I run into people sometimes and they're like, how are you and Nick? And I hear the question behind that, which is like, people are so scared it'll fall apart. Because we've seen that. Like we've all had friends who get married and leave us, right? And like, and so I've actually met a lot of Side B people over the years who just like, they always are like, you and Nick still friends? And like that question breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still friends. I still live with him right now. He actually recently got engaged and will be getting married next summer. And so we're in a season of like figuring out what it's like to continue to share life and be really supportive of each other and be really invested in each other, while now making room for his marriage commitment and making sure we honor that. So I will be moving out in a few months. This will be our last Christmas living together for a few years, which is kind of like, there's some sadness to it, but honestly, I've had some grief around it, but I gotta say, like Nick and I were talking one day, and he just smiled at me and he said, "Man, I'm so excited for us to build new traditions and rhythms and ways that we stay invested." And he means it, and like so, I'm excited about that. So we are still sharing daily life. We're still committed to sharing daily life for the rest of our lives.
Here for you. I mean, because like I think what you and Nick have, and I've been through this with people, it's like, what it's going to take with future, it's like a lot of trust in each other. And what y'all have done over these last seasons and chapters together, it's like y'all have poured deep into the well and the cistern that is y'all's friendship. And so y'all are going to have so much to draw from. Y'all are not drawing from a place of empty, try to create new rhythms and patterns. Y'all are building upon just a mutual shared love and respect. That's what has me tearing up over here.
Okay, Pastor Henry. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know what's so funny is this summer I think I was panicking a bit of like, oh man, what's this going to be like? And I wanted so badly to just be excited for him and his fiance.
Yeah.
And yet I was still going like, oh, what if I lose my buddy?
Yeah.
And in the past few weeks, especially, I feel like God has been like, I have been building this from day one. I have always been the one building it. And like, so Nick and I have joined God in building really good community.
Yes.
And we can trust God to keep holding that community together.
Yeah.
And by the way, like he's also done a lot of work with his fiance and like made sure like, hey, this is a shared value. Like, you know, Nick told me from the beginning, like, hey man, I really value the community we're building. And like, I would want my family to be a part of that. And his fiance has her own chosen family. And so like, actually our conversations are not just how do we honor like their relationship and also me and Nick's friendship, but also like, oh man, now we've got like 6 other people we've got to make sure we're having dinner with and like investing in. And so
that's so beautiful.
It's been really fun. Yeah, it's really fun.
And like there's something one of my friends will get married a couple of years ago and we were sitting at my house and the power had went out. And so, which my power never goes off in my house anyways, but some reason it went out. So we're just laying here in the candle, like one of us, he was throwing a tennis ball. And I was really scared about the future because he was about to get married and whatnot. And this friendship that I'd had for years and years, so we like had a rich foundation as well. And he said, Henry, like, I don't know what to tell you and I don't know what the future looks like, but I can promise you that with God, we're going to figure it out together. And that's what I know for you. Yeah. And that's what I know for you and Nick. It's like God has y'all because y'all are living in God's will. And when you live in God's will, life is so rich and beautiful. And I'm just so honored to know you and Nick. And like, just because I don't want to put you on this pedestal, right? Because like you never want to set up people for like failure or something like that. But it's just like, I and so many people are rooting for you and Nick because I think y'all have modeled this in such a godly, authentic way that is honestly, it really is beautiful to see. And I like, even when sometimes like, you know, you can't understand something fully, but you could see the beauty in it. And it's like, even outside of not being able to understand it, but like, even like when you look, scripture lives such a fragrance aroma that the world is attracted by, like you and Nick are the only believers, or you are the only believer in a speaking setting in DC, but the world attracted the aroma that you are putting out because it's such a rich life you're living for the Lord. Okay, pretty much scripts. Okay, I am on one. Oh.
Yeah. You're Pastor Henry today. I'm vibe. This is good. Yeah, it's like, man, I think that's been the coolest thing to see. So first of all, like, it's not just been that our friendship has become more beautiful, which it has. Like, I was telling someone the other day, like, I feel like I historically have no real tie to like Christmas. Like, you know, being an immigrant here, all our family was in Brazil, so like Christmas always felt weird. And then since living with Nick, Christmas is my favorite and we have so much fun in our house and we have all these traditions. But then like it's made our other relationships more beautiful because we've like learned how to love our other friends better.
Yeah.
And then even his fiance, like, I mean, she just texted me like 7 minutes ago. I'm more likely to get a text from her than from him. She lives 5 minutes away now. She'll randomly text me like, I made cookies and dropping some off on my way to work. And just like
I love
the connection and the community there. And so I think it's just been really beautiful to see God faithfully care for us.
When they live together, when they get married, she is going to appreciate you so much more because you have prepared and molded and helped shape that man. He's going to be a better husband because he learned how to get better for somebody. It's true.
That's already happened. I mean, there has been one moment where she was like, okay, can I vent to you about something? I need your feedback on like how to handle a conflict with Nick. And I was like, I have been waiting for this day. I was made for such a time. But it's like, that's the thing is like, that community is so good because all of us need support and all of us need help like navigating conflict. And so like, and just for him to know, like he's known, like she was like, I don't want him to feel like we're talking about him. I'm like, girl, he knows I love him, and he also has been waiting for the day we are talking about a conflict and can problem solve together. And so it's been so good for us to do that. Yeah.
Oh God, I can't wait till he's like, yes. Now it's almost like you have an ally. Like it's like, oh, yep. Oh, you noticed this too about Nick? I thought I was the only one.
Oh, girl, yeah. I have to be very careful not to do that because I hate being ganged up on, and like that's it's just it's a fine line.
Yeah, that is true. So you mentioned obviously being an immigrant, and to switch gears a little bit before I bring us back full circle, the conversation you and I had in 2020 was online, because you and I are on air. You and I have multiple conversations offline all the time that people probably would not need to see because they're just chaotic. But they're fruitful, but fruitful in very different ways. But 2020, if you were living under a rock and were not aware, was a lot of, it was not a lot of people. It was a lot of white people learning things that people of color have been telling them for ages and ages. And so all of a sudden, the veil was ripped and torn in two and their eyes were opened. Yes, la-di-da. But so anyway, so white people, y'all had a reckoning amongst yourselves and race and the world and y'all's behavior through it. I saw this meme the other day, and it was like history summed up. Bunch of people having a good time. Here comes the European man ready to ruin it all. Oh, no. But I mean, literally, anyways, that's a whole other thing. We don't need to talk about colonialism right now. But see exactly why we cannot be on a stage together. Because imagine if we were having a talk together, and then we just veered right into
Nope. Yeah, no.
Oh, gosh. Then you cut my feed so fast. But no, so 2020 was obviously just a lot of awakening in the church and our broader culture in this country. And so people like you and myself, we found ourselves in ministry spaces, in a lot of spaces with our white friends and people who, especially like you and I, who have a background in predominantly white spaces and churches, rather. And so that was taxing on people of color in a way, because for the first time, we're like, oh, we're being listened to, we're being heard. When it's like, we've been saying, so it's frustrating because like we've been saying this, but also it's like, oh, like thank you for finally believing us. But also it's like, it shouldn't have taken everything that happened that led up to that. It shouldn't have taken Donald Trump's presidency. It shouldn't have taken, or election. It shouldn't have taken George Floyd passing away, being murdered, for all these conversations to happen. But they did, and so it came to a head, and we all of a sudden found a place where our voices were being valued. We were being platformed. We were being listened to. We were being championed. And you and I had a conversation on this podcast, and even just with the voice communities and stuff like that. And so what would you say the change you've seen? Like I said earlier when we were texting, we could spend a lot of time talking about race and stuff, but there's books written. There's nothing that white evangelicals need to know that they don't have access to at this point in time. Now it's just a willingness or unwillingness. And so since our conversation 2020, what encouraging shifts have you seen in your own personal life with people in broader community, or just even within the organization you work for? And just when it comes to race and Christianity in the church.
So first of all, I think like a summary for me since 2020 is like, if you want to listen, you will. And part of my work at Revoice is I get to work with some church partners, and like I am genuinely amazed at the amount of churches who are investing in better race conversations and in addressing like racial justice issues in their church community. Like I have been so blessed to meet some of the most amazing pastors in our country in the last 2 years, and see a lot of churches that are investing in this conversation, both the sexuality conversation and the race conversation, empowering people of color, like being extremely humble in recognizing ways they have failed. I've seen churches transfer leadership so that the church could more closely look like the community they tried to serve.
Love that.
I've met a white pastor who decided to give up his senior position to a black pastor from within the community because it better fit the needs and the demographic of the community, and he became an associate pastor under just like incredible humility. So I think an important thing to highlight is there are so many churches that have listened and have grown and are still looking to listen and grow, right? Investing in this conversation. Churches that have been willing to lose members and income because of right? And there are churches who would rather be comfortable or who would rather not listen.
The entire time you're talking, I'm like, Lord, I need to leave the South. That's what I'm just saying.
Well, and I just like, I'm so grateful to have, I think like one of the things to my work at Revoice is by the time someone gets to us, they've got to be at a certain level of being willing to do nuance. Mm-hmm. And so I end up meeting like the best pastors in the world. And I'm like, okay, there is hope. Like God's church, like there are some incredibly faithful leaders in God's church, and like God is stewarding us. I also want to say in our own community, like Henry, I think in 2020, you and I were both so frustrated with the Side B space and lack of listening to racial minorities. And the win this year, this past Revoice, I'm in charge of assigning where the affinity groups meet. And we always look at like past sizes of affinity groups and assign them rooms. And the amount of people who came up to me and were like, you gave us a bad room for the racial minorities affinity space. It was too small. And I was like, what?
Okay.
Tell me more. They were like, yeah, there were like almost 100 of us. And I was like, what? Like, and that was so incredible to look at this year's Revoice. And I just want to say, like, I obviously work for Revoice. I'm a little biased, but I have watched the leadership of Revoice be so humble in feedback since.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you and I were part of giving it to them before I was on staff. Since I've been on staff, everything I've ever said as a staff member, they've always just been like, we got to do it, but we just got to do it well, and how, and to see that we are seeing new people of color on our stage, especially the last few years, we've seen some incredible women of color leading us. And I like seeing the community make more space. And I would say this past year's Revoice was easily the most diverse Revoice we've ever had.
Sure.
And the worship was incredible, largely because of that, by the way.
Right?
Yeah. It was such a transformational worship experience at Revoice, and it was our first time having a Black worship leader. And I don't think those two things are like a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
So I'm so excited. I still am so frustrated with the American church on so many levels, but can I just say, I am excited with our community because I feel like our community is learning, and as a movement, we are fighting to empower people of color.
Yeah.
And also just recognizing, like in our space, there's like several layers of minority, right?
Yeah.
Like someone is gay and Black and in a mixed orientation marriage, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, everyone got to be praying for Elizabeth Black every single day of the week, right? Like,
okay. Maybe she's a woman, a queer woman, biracial, and a mixed orientation marriage, but interracial marriage. Okay.
Right. Like, and she is an incredible leader, by the way, and an incredible speaker. And I think just one of the examples of so many of the incredible people in our community that we have to learn to, like, make room for and listen to. And God has faithfully been bringing us leaders from so many different backgrounds. And I've watched our community really respond to that positively the last few years. So I've been really excited about that.
When you said something about the American church a second ago, just kind of still frustrated. But you know what I've started clinging to more and more the last few years? I was like, you know what? The global church, the Big C church, it's majority people of color. And like,
right.
The church is so much bigger than the American evangelical system or church. Sometimes when I start getting frustrated, I'm like, oh, these people are literally dropping milk in a bucket. I'm just like, it's not that serious. The rest of the world, the Big C church doesn't even have time to waste on things like this because they're seeing far more bigger pictures than we are because they're not caught in these silly little, not silly, but like, to them it would be silly because those things don't exist in other contexts of Christianity the way it does here. So that always encourages me when I'm just like, you know what, even if I'm frustrated right now here, the Big C church does not look like this as a whole. So if I can just like figure out how to make my slice of the little C church that I have here on earth that is in heaven, then that's my job.
Right. Yeah, amen. And like, I'm excited, like this year's conference, I feel like is going to be the most global conference we've had. We've got a speaker. This is not a conference plug, but like a little bit. But we've got a speaker come, like Steve Mwendia, who's a pastor from Kenya,
come on,
right?
Kenya.
Like, and like this guy is incredible. And I was just talking to him, and one of the things I keep thinking is how much other cultures have to teach us. Those of us who have to be celibate or committed to celibacy, but we're having to be celibate in America of all places, where like we don't know how to think about single people well, and we don't think about broader family structures. And other cultures have so much to teach us. And I think it's so important to be learning how do we do community well from those people, especially. And so I'm excited about that and how we're making room in the conversation for that.
That is my Kenyan brother. We're going to have a time. Okay, Steve.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What a joy.
As we bring this full circle, so what are some of your hopes for class, Greg, this, and even I said this myself. I was like, because I think I say this every year. I was like, you know what? We've always set a place to like, this will be my last year of tenure. This is my last year working something. And like Greg is like, Henry, you've been saying that every year, and like you come back. But eventually, I think as we not age out of the system, but it's like, I think we've already made so much like strides and progress, just like in the last 6-7 years. It's like, what are your hopes for Revoice 3 years from now when we've hit 10 years? And what are your hopes 15 years from now? What do you even hope for the Side B space to look like? Would you hope that maybe not even a need for this conference in 10, 15, 20 years? What are your hopes for Side B overall? Your maybe visions, your goals? Yeah.
I used to hope we wouldn't need it anymore. Like I used to be like, wow, it'll be really great to one day not need to go to a place where we feel safe. It would be great if our Sunday morning experience felt like this. But I think I've realized that like, because we are minorities, like there will always be need for it. I'm hoping the need pivots from hospital to family reunion.
Yes.
Like right now, so many of us come in so wounded from our Sunday church experiences, our lack of community in our day-to-day lives. I want that to end. I want every day of our lives to feel as safe and like community filled as the conference does. And I want the conference to just be a place where we get together and like share our unique experience as sexual minorities who follow Jesus, the historic sexual ethic, right? Like I want that family reunion feel, because that's the thing to me that's special about Revoice. It's such a sweet family reunion.
Yes. It's like a college reunion when you haven't seen some friends in a while, then you get together and it's like, oh my gosh, so good to see you. Like, catch me up on your grandkids or this or that.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, it's so funny. Like, I work for the space now, but like every year I go and I'm like, wow, this is one of the most incredible things I've ever done. Like worship at Revoice last year, I've never had a worship experience like that in my entire life.
Let alone in your space.
Right. And so I think our community has something really special. And I think we're going to make a lot of progress in the church. My prayer is that like there will be so much progress in the church with queer people having access to like safe discipleship and like a lot of dignity and community. And even then I will want to get together with our family and worship with our family. But I'm hoping we'll be in a place where so much more of that comes from gratitude and safety instead of needing necessity. To recover.
Yes. Yeah. Instead of like survival necessity. Remember when my my pastor friend Garrett, but he said a couple of years ago, he's like, his hope for Revoice was for like where it no longer feels like a parachurch, but just like a community. It's like no one feels like, okay, I need to get my church needs met here, but rather because my church needs being met so healthily and so well at my home and local church that now I can pour into the space with joy and gladness, not just like, hey, I'm wounded, come fix me up and patch me up and send me back off for another year. Then I come back and
I think I hope that too. Like I wanted to just feel like this exciting community that we belong to. I also want to see it pivot to more of like smaller community spaces. Like I've loved seeing the growth of our chapters and our online spaces. And I think some of those things, the ways we're able to connect with each other year round are so meaningful. Yeah. But I want to see more emphasis on that too.
I missed the holiday party the other day. I was just thinking, I meant to put that in my calendar, but
it's this coming Sunday.
Okay, perfect. I was like, I got that email and I was like, okay, look at this. I was like, come on.
No, it's going to be, honestly, Stephen's been putting together something amazing. And even that's so special. Just like our community getting together, recognizing Advent, doing liturgy readings together. That's so cool, right? Like that's so special. And I want us to keep doing that, even if our Sunday morning church experiences in the Lord's name become safer and safer and more dignifying to us.
I love that. What is next on the horizon for you?
Oh, what an interesting question. I think this point where I'm at is I'm about to finish grad school in about a year. Nick's getting married, a little bit of transition. I see God growing my chosen family, which is really exciting. Like I'll be moving in with someone who I call my lesbian life partner, but a really close lesbian side B friend.
Oh yeah.
I'll be moving in with her as Nick gets married, and we're going to be looking for ways to like invest in Nick and his family and living closer to them. And so I think it's a season of like seeing that chosen family grow, which is really exciting and special.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as I finish my degree, I'm getting a clinical mental health degree. I've been asked multiple times to by a publisher to submit a book proposal.
Yes.
And so I am hoping to finish grad school and then submit the book proposal. I have decided to wait on the book until after grad school.
They've been waiting on you for like a year, right?
They've been really gracious. They've been very patient with me, and I've been like, yeah, maybe. And then I just finally had to tell them, like, look, as long as I'm in grad school, I will never have capacity to do this well. But I've been asked by a Christian publisher to submit a book proposal on basically how the church can practice friendship better.
Okay, yes. Can you give us any teasers outside of that?
Honestly, the biggest teaser is that we know all of it. Like the Side B community practices so much of it.
Okay.
But I really want to look at how good friendship is something the Bible has always commanded us into.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I'm really passionate about is exploring how the church tends to focus on like commands regarding sin. Like, for instance, like sexual sin is something that comes up a lot for church discipleship of LGBTQ people. But then there are all these commands in Scripture around community that no one holds anyone accountable for.
No.
Like
that's
Galatians,
really true.
Right. So look at Galatians. Galatians says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ.
Yeah.
That's command language, right? Like fulfill the law of right. The
Not
law.
A choice. Not an option.
But you've never seen someone brought under church discipline for not bearing someone else's burdens.
No.
But you have seen someone brought under church discipline because they thought maybe you looked at a guy a little too romantic.
Yes. Or for being too like, well, you know what, you're too much right now. Like we can't do. It's like, oh no, it's like that is so true.
I really want to explore what does Scripture command us into in community, and like what does a modern living of really faithful friendship based on Scripture look like, and how do we encourage that in the local church?
Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to that book. I'll be at your book signing. When it's on the New York Times bestseller, we'll be there.
They'll be quoted in it. Yeah.
Yes.
They'll be like, and here's a story about the one time I called my friend Henry crying.
Got it. Great. Oh, gosh. I wish we just have audio from that. It's like, actually, we have live footage of this.
Right, like scan this QR code and...
That would be amazing.
Right.
My gosh. Well, Art, we do not want to keep you, but it has been such a joy and pleasure getting to be on this journey with you. And like, I think as we were talking with Greg, like, it's like, so a lot of people listen to us. It's like, oh, the podcast ending, so we won't hear from these people as much or anymore. But it's like the beauty of it for all of us now, because we're all so connected. It's like, oh, I'll probably talk to Art next week. So it's not like I'm signing off the podcast.
Right.
Y'all won't ever hear from me or Art again. Like, y'all will never hear anything Art's doing again, because it's so now there's so many new people to access us, our information and whatnot. And so this is not the end you'll hear from Art by far or any of us. And Art, can you give us, for those who might not know, can you give us the particulars and details about Revoice 25, date, location, time, and some deadlines, just so we can go ahead and close this out and plug this?
Listen, if you're sitting here and you're like, oh my gosh, I also wish I had amazing gay friends to call and cry with, come to Revoice and meet some. Seriously, Henry picked me up at the airport for my first Revoice, and it was our first time meeting in person. And we just spent the whole car ride looking at each other like we were meeting a robot
like
for the first time.
Real?
Like,
yeah.
It's like the weirdest thing. It's like I'm meeting a celebrity. Henry, the man from the computer. So Revoice 2025 is going to be in Seattle this July 2025. I believe it's July 9th through 12th. I should know this. Yeah, it's July 9th through 12th. In Seattle. It's going to be an incredible, beautiful venue. It's University Presbyterian Church. If you get your registration before January 1st, I don't even know if this podcast episode will be out by then, but early registration will still be open. But if not, you can still register. We'll have scholarship applications open in January in case you need financial assistance getting there. And it's just going to be an incredible time of worship and of hearing from leaders of our community. And specifically, the question we're asking this year is, what beautiful things is God building in our community? I really believe that God wants to build beautiful things in the lives of queer Christians.
Yes. I just started singing that song.
What's up?
Beautiful things.
Yes, okay. Yes. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's, we'll be exploring that question. It's going to be unbelievable. We have some old favorite speakers coming back. We have some new incredible speakers coming back, or coming for the first time. And so really it's going to be such a joy, and you should be there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the information. And we'll be sure to link it when the podcast drops, just to link to your Voice website and registration.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Art.
Thank you.
All right.
Hello, Life on Side B family. Really excited to be doing these kind of follow-up interviews with guests that have been on the podcast. And I am honored to be here with Matt and Jason. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi. For those of you who listened to a lot of this podcast before, you may have heard the episode from the first season, Matt on Celibate Partnerships. And Matt is back with us and his partner, Jason. Matt, your episode is literally one of the most listened to episodes of the entire podcast. How does that feel for you?
I'm both touched and scared at the same time.
I totally get that. It makes sense. And it's, because this is one of the questions. Celibate Partnerships is one of the areas a lot of people want to know more about. And I was so glad we were able to touch on that so early in the podcast. And so thank you for doing that. And I love, Jason, that you were willing to hop on here as well, because I was like, why not? This has been 5 years since we last sat down. Let's talk to both of you. So Jason, could you share a little bit about yourself, maybe for people to know you, like maybe like your faith tradition, whatever would feel like good for people to know about you?
Sure. I grew up in a quasi-Christian family. We went to church on a regular basis. It was evangelical Protestant, Methodist, but on the far right of Methodism. And then my church eventually left and became an independent evangelical church. When I was in high school, I sort of moved towards agnosticism.
Okay.
Dipped my toe in atheism, I guess, but then kind of moved back, and then met a friend in college who was Episcopalian, who brought me into the Episcopal Church, introduced me to liturgical worship. I remained an Episcopalian for almost 14 years, and then after that, I became Orthodox in 2003, and have been Eastern Orthodox since then.
Okay. And Matt, remind me, are you also Eastern Orthodox?
I am Eastern Catholic.
Eastern Catholic.
So our liturgies are the same. Yes.
Okay.
And if you went to my particular parish, it would be indistinguishable from an Orthodox parish, but we are in fact part of the Catholic Church. So
Okay. I might ask you guys just how these kind of things relate to each other. But to start off, I think we may have touched on this on your first episode, Matt, but I would love, now that I have you both here, how did you two initially meet? Like, in this kind of... We can see, people can go back and listen and see if it matches up. No,
This is why I'm scared. There is a thread. There is part.
Cool.
Yeah. Simple answer is that we met on the internet. And, everyone always hates giving that an answer, but that's the truth. I think especially, in gay world in general, but also especially in the side B world, so much of what our community has been made through the internet. Just unquestionably. So, just everyone has to accept that and not question it and not criticize it. We met on the internet. And, we met on the internet at a time when I was coming out of a period where I was actually undertaking a very dedicated and intentional search to find a side B partner. Like that was something that I was really seeking out actively. I decided to give that up because it wasn't bearing fruit and because it seemed a little bit contrived for a variety of reasons. And literally within a week of making that decision, he and I encountered one another in an online side B group where there was the discussion of celibate partnerships, and we caught each other's eye because we had made a point about wanting to conduct such a partnership while living in separate places, which is interesting because that's no longer the case.
Yeah. Which, I definitely want to end up asking about that, but keep going.
But he's absolutely right. We met because I made some general comment about whether anyone had ever entered into a celibate partnership but lived in separate homes, because that was something at the time I wanted to do. And that latched onto that, and that's how we started talking. So
love it. Yep. Amazing. And that's I'm trying to remember when we initially talked, you guys had been pursuing a partnership for like a year or two, something like that at that point. Like how long now has it been that you guys have been in partnership?
It's been over 6 years.
Over 6 years. Okay, that tracks. Crazy.
Yeah. And by the time that we initially met, or we initially started talking in the summer of 2018, which I can remember very easily because it was just really weeks after the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, which is like now the formative marker of my entire lifetime. Like, there you go.
Love it. Oh my gosh. So I mean, a big part of what we're doing with these kind of follow-up episodes is just asking, it's been 5 years. What has been learned? Jason, we haven't gotten to hear, from you really at all, but like, would love to hear from you guys, I guess maybe in general. What have been some of the big things you have learned about partnership over these 6 years? Like, what have been some of your takeaways, some of your lessons, and I'll kind of allow you guys one to each, talk, and you can share individually how you've approached this.
Go ahead.
What are some of the big lessons? For me, I have probably more than anything appreciated the fact that I have someone who can be here for reliable support. At any time. We've had some major things happen, I think, health-wise, honestly, over that period of time. And I'll just speak for myself. I mean, I contracted a rare illness, which took months and months to diagnose, and it was debilitating for work. And so he was there to help me with that. He was also there to help me when I had to have surgery on both of my knees simultaneously.
Oh my God.
And that obviously was, not great for my mobility. And so I needed help just around the house. And so, I mean, those are the extreme examples, but just along the way too. I mean, I've had COVID a number of times. There have been times when, I think, there was just a difficult circumstance sort of in my general work or personal life that was difficult to work through emotionally. And, having someone just present and always available to prioritize me and the sort of support that I need has been invaluable. And so I think the biggest lesson for me, more than anything, and there are many others too, but more than anything, it's just been, I value this guy and the fact that, I have a rock to rely on. And so that's really been, I think, for me, what it's all about.
Love it. Yeah. Jason?
I'd probably echo all of that. For me, similar things health-wise have occurred. I had a total hip replacement back in April. So it's, having that here, owning a home together, sharing life together in the way that we are, has really highlighted for me the importance of having someone like that. And, it doesn't, for people, it doesn't have to look like or exist in the same way that we are doing things. But, it's just been wonderful having them here to help out with things like that. Something else that I've been realizing lately is, what it means to be, it's really driven home for me what it means to be intimate. We talk about intimacy a lot, but you don't really start experiencing intimacy until you really start being a large part of someone's life.
Yes.
And Josh, I'm sure you understand part of what I'm talking about, but living with when you love somebody, when you want to take care of them, you begin to understand, at least in a small way, what intimacy really is. The other things that have been, at least wonderful for me is, being able to share a spiritual life with this person, being able to share a prayer life on occasion with this person. And our liturgies and our theology are very similar. And so we can wildly disagree at times, but, we also have a lot of overlap in our beliefs. So that's been really nice to be able to share that with somebody.
And on that point too, I mean, I think another thing that has been really good for me is, 6 years is a long time to be with a person. And you really do start to learn all the nuances about the person. You start to learn every day new things about their personal history that sort of helps that blooming onion unfold more and more. And you see the layers of the person. But in the course of doing that, you really get to challenge yourself. I can be a strong-headed person. I'm aware of that at times. And sometimes that strong-headedness comes from an oftentimes wrongfully held conviction that I'm just right. And Jason is very good at taking me out of that headspace and showing me an alternate perspective. It really doesn't come naturally for me. And it's having the constant access to that, and to sort of to be able to tap that well to help me just take my thinking on a different path. That's been humbling and valuable to me. So and it's changed me over the course of 6 years. I think pretty significant.
And it's been the exact same for, I mean, we balance each other well. We've been very blessed to have found each other, and to not only overlap and share certain things, but bring out each other's strengths, be role models for each other.
Yeah. I think that's so key, because I resonate so much with all of that. Like, talking about the idea of intimacy, of truly seeing someone. And I feel like we don't talk enough about how so much of that is also seeing people at their worst, like just knowing the complexities of a person. And it's not just about bonding in these beautiful moments, but also like the clash and how you're going to work through it and how you're going to push through it. I know, like, one of the things like Christian and I have had to work through is we have very different styles of conflict with other people. We have very different styles. And then we'll critique each other in those styles, which then causes conflict between us. And we've had to learn and grow and see each other and see the beauty, and also learn how to hear each other and benefit from the styles of the other person. But it's taken the, like, allowing to get into the mud and not turning back, like still going through it and still pushing forward. And the intimacy that comes from that is like what you guys are describing. So it's beautiful.
I'm sorry, Josh.
No, go ahead, please.
Yep. On the lighter side, Matt made a comment one time. We can never break up because we know too much about each other.
There were years worth of text messages that I dare not release to the public.
but along we've been following, there is an element, and I don't want to give the impression to anyone that what we're doing is marriage. It's not, but there is some overlap, right? Yeah. There's just some undeniable overlap. And in Eastern Christian tradition, the emphasis is put on being a servant, like serving the other person. And so maybe more than anything, one of the things this has challenged me to do is to learn to do that. And that's where some humility comes in, but also like pulling me out of myself and trying to focus on what the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Well, so jumping into, it was already mentioned, is one thing I would love to talk to you guys about is, you literally bonded over the idea of not living together. And Matt, we talked about this, and I actually love this because it just shows we grow, we change, the things that happen. It just morphs. I think more than anything, people who are not in celibate partnerships do not understand. There's literally no guidebook. Like, there's nothing out there. We're all figuring this out as we go, and everyone is trying to do it. So I would love what you would be willing to share about what that process was like for figuring out that you were going to decide to live together.
Want me to go first?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I was initially very committed to the idea of living separately, well, I think there are a lot of things that went. The first thing is that I'm a hyper independent person by nature, being an only child and then being a nerd, and to a certain extent, I think also being a Catholic. Just they all sort of come together in this very kind of hyper independent way. But I think also part of it was that I didn't want to give people the wrong idea about what we were doing. And then a lot of other things, a lot of other thoughts factored into that. But I think for me, the biggest change in my thinking was that I felt I needed to let go of this hyper independence streak that I was on. And that came about, I think, in part because of some things that Jason taught me along the way, about, what it means to develop intimacy with a person, what it means to be at their disposal when you've made the commitment to do so. It's a lot easier to do that when you're in a shared living situation. Yeah. So that, and then I think also just the sense of adventure about owning a place together and making it into something that's our own. And also the fact that you have to turn blind eyes and you have to, give and take in terms of the decisions you make around that. Yeah. All that factored into it. And now, I mean, we live in a house that is now in its 125th anniversary since having been built.
Crazy.
And it's a great house, but it has some work that needs to be done on it. And so we encounter this issue quite frequently in terms where we have to come to a diplomatic agreement about what exactly will be done with the house. So, sorry, that was a lot. But
I love it. Okay.
Matt is much verbose than I am, and he's a much better speaker. So, I would echo all of that again. I think from a pragmatic perspective, one of the things that we discussed and realized pretty early on is that, combining our resources, we'd be able to have a better house than either of us would be able to have alone.
Yes.
And, from a more, I guess, spiritual perspective, sharing that space together, is what has helped us realize a lot of the things that we've been talking about up to this, right? Which I don't know would have happened in exactly the same way or been as deep an experience, were we to have had separate homes. So I absolutely don't regret doing this. I think it was probably the best decision for us. I don't know if you regret.
I don't regret it. But one thing I should
This would be a time to say. No, Joe.
I'm divesting my share of the house. Do with it what you want. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, one thing I can also add to that, though, is I mentioned earlier the whole thing about giving people the wrong idea. I didn't follow up on that. What I realized over time is that there are many, many instances where we can be as explicit as we can possibly be about what the nature of this relationship is, and people just draw whatever conclusion they want to.
Yep.
Yeah.
So whether we're living separately or living in the same house doesn't make a blind bit of difference.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you guys about that, was like how your engagement with other people has that shifted? Because what you're saying, I have come to that place of like, I'm tired of that. Listen, we're just going to live, and the conclusions you want to build, that's on you. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'm putting words into his mouth when I say that I'm probably a little bit more fastidious than he is about wanting to be very, very direct and upfront about telling people what the exact nature of this relationship is.
Yeah. He would have a sign in the front yard, I think, if I let him.
Not really untrue. Want to get the word out. Like internal campaign mode, basically.
Marketing. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. We've invited a lot of people over to the house for dinner. We're big dinner hosters.
Love it.
And
I mean, you all have a great house for hosting. I do need to say, it makes sense. Sorry, continue.
Josh has been to the house.
I have been to the house. I'm not a stalker. I have been to the house. So anyway. Continue though. So you like to have a lot of people over to the house. Yeah.
Yes, we like having a lot of people over to the house, and many of these people have been invited over under the impression that, not under the impression that we are a celibate partnership, just that we are like any old sort of gay couple out there.
Yeah.
And so that has led on occasion to some interesting conversations mid-dinner.
Yeah.
And lots of reactions that are very much emblazoned in my mind as I see the gears churning in their head.
Yeah.
After we spill it. Yeah. But then we've also had a lot of people over specifically because they found out by one way or another exactly what we were and they wanted to learn more. In fact, we just had a lady over about a week ago who was an old college friend. She's a senior citizen. And she is the sort of person who is very, very sympathetic with gay people. She's also in the church. She is not herself lesbian, but, and hearing what we had to say, she said, yeah, if I were lesbian, I would probably think that I would have to live in the way that you guys are living. So she just wanted to come over and like pick our minds. So we've just had all these interesting social encounters around this that I think have been greatly enabled by the house.
Yeah. 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 That makes total sense, because that's kind of like, I don't know. We've navigated so much. I mean, we all do. We all navigate this like weird space of like, how do you promote your privacy while also like wanting people to not have a false idea and like finding that line. And I've said this on the podcast before, but like, since Christian works in public health, there's a lot of assumptions that like are made about our relationship, and depending on who it is, we'll sometimes just be like, okay, whatever, like, this is not worth our time. And other times we're like you said, you have a dinner and you're like, there's going to be an interesting conversation at this dinner. So,
well, it's interesting too, because, I'm friends with other people in celibate partnerships, including, two guys who are in DC who I'm very close with. And, they say the exact same thing. Like, it doesn't matter how explicit they are. People just don't internalize it properly at all, which I just find to be the most interesting psychological, sociological phenomenon I've ever encountered. Like, how people can do that at Burgess. But I don't know. I'll write a dissertation about it someday.
I think it speaks to, we literally don't have categories for it. We don't have it. Yeah. And so people are going to force it into a category that already feels comfortable in their brain.
Yep.
Yep. So it's just going to be how it is. God, we could keep talking about this forever, but I want to make sure to get to a few more questions. Obviously, go back to anything if it feels pertinent and you want to talk about it.
Good.
But another question that came to my mind that I would love to ask you is, because this is also a common thing with celibate partnerships, have you guys done a ceremony, like a covenant ceremony? Have you wanted to do a ceremony? Has that been decided not?
So, Matt stopped me if he disagrees, so I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
So we actually last night, after I attended a friend's wedding, we revisited the topic of doing an Adelpho Poesis ceremony. So,
okay.
I talked to a few priests about this. There is one priest who is willing to do that for us.
Hey,
so
amazing.
That's definitely still on the table.
Yeah,
we have, because people will probably ask. I mean, we have toyed with the idea of getting a marriage certificate because a lot of the things that we've been trying to work out lately are legal.
It's so
issues, money, health, all the things that you want to make sure that the person who is your partner is taken care of if you're gone or if something happens or you could visit each other in the hospital. So
yes,
we're still kind of working that out 6 years in, and we have drawn up or are in the process of drawing up medical power of attorney paperwork. But so in terms of a service, I think the Adelpho Oasis service is definitely on the table. It is something that I would like.
Yeah.
Sooner, but
I think, I think for me, the marriage certificate question is fraught. Only because I have some interest in being in a ministry role, and it's very difficult to get around the meaning of having a marriage certificate, which is going to be public record and everything, and how you work that out. The city of St. Louis, at least currently, still offers domestic partnership certificates, which I realize has a majority sense of just being kind of marriage with a different word. But there is an explicit minority sense of it built into that idea, which has nothing to do with being in a sexual relationship. So that's a little bit easier to navigate from my vantage point, especially if that would be on the horizon for me. But I think one thing that we are thinking about is trying to find a Christian family lawyer.
Yes.
Which, if in the absence of either of those certificates, this could all just be drawn up in a way that won't really create an impediment for me later down the road.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I think, I've engaged with this before, where technically all the benefits of marriage, could you draw them up separately? Yes. You can in many ways, but it's so much more paperwork. It's whereas the question is then, do you do this that has the name of marriage on it? Which, as you're saying, if you're in ministry or something, gets so complex because it is public knowledge. But really, it's all of the things you're needing just get done in this one swoop. Like you were saying, Jason, visitation rights, health, inheritance, all these things. So I know it's a complex question that we all have to ask ourselves and how to approach it.
And, along the lines of, with all the paperwork, typically comes a lot of money. I mean, things cost, especially if you're doing them separately, whereas going down and getting a $30 marriage certificate at the courthouse.
It just takes
different, but it's unfortunate that we don't have something else, another option available to us.
Yeah. I do love that St. Louis has domestic partnership, because Florida actually got rid of it when gay marriage passed. So there's just
a lot of places did.
Yeah. Which was just so crazy. I'm why not just leave it? Why not have both of these as options?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? I guess I want to just open this up just to, to final question of, first of all, is there anything else you feel like we haven't touched on that you would love to share? But I would also love to say, if you now, with 5 more years down the road of experience than, when Matt, we last talked, and Jason for the first time talking on the podcast, what would you give? What is a piece of advice you would give to either people that are starting in a partnership or discerning partnership now?
Okay. Go first. I'm getting pointed at to go first.
And audience, a lot of these questions I have put on the spot, Jason and Matt, so sorry. But so we're getting raw answers here, but yeah, go ahead.
I honestly feel that the biggest piece of advice I could give is that you should not seek out a celibate partnership in the way that you would seek out a marriage. It is not the sort of thing where you are looking for love and you're looking for the vision of marriage that, marriage brings with it, just to fill a void that you feel you can't have as a side B person. I think that's going to lead you to disappointment, if you do that. This has been said many times by people who have written on in the past, but a celibate partnership is based on priority and not on exclusivity. And it's definitely, as Jason mentioned, based on a sense of servant sacrifice rather than, frankly, kind of like accruing to yourself a family and all of the accoutrements of marriage and things like that. And especially if you are in a concrete situation where you feel like you've encountered someone who might be like a viable candidate for a celibate partnership, if you feel yourself drawn to that person primarily because of butterflies in your stomach, that's also not a good departing point in my view. It has to be about priority and sacrifice for the other person. Otherwise, I just feel, unless you're just sort of, on the guru plane and you can cancel all that out in your mind, I just don't feel that that's starting from the right spot.
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think I disagree with any of that. One of the things I wanted to say is that, when it came to Matt and I, both of us are approaching this, at a different phase of life than a lot of people who are wanting to get into celibate partnerships and who have tried to get into celibate partnerships. He and I had both had relationships in the past. I had had significant long-term side A relationships in the past. He's had other relationships in the past as well. So when we met, we were at a point in our lives where we were grounded in our faith. We were grounded, we knew what we wanted. We had already experienced some of these other things, other parts of life that maybe some other people, especially younger people, have not. So I think it was easier for us in that respect. I don't think it's bad necessarily to have butterflies or be drawn by butterflies to another person. There was some romance in our relationship. There were, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I had what I would describe as butterflies when I met him. And so, I think those things can serve to pull two people together. But when you're entering into a celibate partnership, you really have to understand a lot of what Matt was talking about. You need to understand, I'm not doing this, to get a husband per se. This isn't marriage, even though there are a lot of elements of marriage in celibate partnerships. There needs to be a lot of discernment. A lot of discernment and, a lot of prayer, and you need to get it. I think you need to really get to know another person. And this could be said in any relationship, really, but you need to get to know the other person and make sure that you're both on the same page.
Yeah. I think that's good. Yes. So butterflies can happen, but butterflies without discernment are butterflies not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's true. 100%. Cause you can have these feelings, but, I just feel like there has to be, I'm like jumping on an answer. I really adamantly feel there has to be discernment, as you're have been talking about. You also have to have grace. I always tell people, I'm like, no one actually knows how to do this. We're all figuring this out together. And so, I remember trying to go to a pastor to get, advice, and they're like, I don't even know what this is, kind of aspect. But, I love all of that you shared. Thank you both so much. It's a beautiful opportunity. Especially I love getting to have this now being in a partnership, because Matt, when we talked, I didn't even know my current partner, let alone we'll be talking about it on Life on Side B. So here we are. It's just a completely different turn of circumstances we're all in.
Amazing. I have to tell you, the truth behind the scenes about that initial podcast episode is that I had an absolutely horrendously terrible, awful work day that day. So I came into that podcast under an enormous amount of stress, and I just powered through that podcast. So this is not the case today. I'm like just free and clear today. It's great.
Well, I can say you played that off flawlessly, and I did not know, and I have not heard from any listener that has known. But like, I can't thank you enough because for you both to come on here, and Matt, for you to have come on 5 years ago, because I do believe this is a topic we need more we need more people to talk on, not from I have it all together, but at least to just like dispel understandings and just give guidance, because this is obviously a thing that many people in our community are trying to figure out, and also it's a part that critics of Side B love to, villainize as well. So your voices are important, and I'm thankful for them.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you all for listening. We will be back as we finish out this final season of Life on Side B. Bye, everyone.